Hi class, today we are looking at Chapter 2, Lesson 1, Why did the Spanish explore the Americas? Before we start reading the text, let's take a look at the timeline up at the top here. So here we have in 1295, Marco Polo returns from China. And remember in our previous reading, we read about Marco Polo and how he wrote a book about the million things he saw on his travels. And then that C, remember what that C means? It means circa, around. Around 1425, Prince Henry of Portugal begins sponsoring explorations of the west coast of Africa. In 1453, Ottoman Turks capture Constantinople. In 1488, Portugal's Bartholomew Diaz sails around Africa to the Indian Ocean. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reaches the New World. In 1498, Portugal's Vasco da Gama reaches India by sea. And in 1522, Spanish Magellan Elcano expedition completes a voyage around the world, which we talked about that last time too. That was pretty impressive to sail around the world back then. All right, let's start at the top. A time of change in Europe. During the Middle Ages, the period between ancient and modern times, most Europeans rarely traveled. However, toward the end of the period, they began making pilgrimages or religious journeys to Christian holy sites. Some went as far away as areas in the Middle East considered to be the Holy Lands by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The contact with new regions made Europeans desire goods from foreign lands. Soon, a new class of Europeans developed, merchants, who made their living by buying and selling goods. They prospered especially in Italian port cities like Venice. They traded for gems, silks, and spices of China and the East Indies, the islands off Southeast Asia. Members of one Venetian family, the Polos, actually traveled to China themselves and met with the great ruler Kublai Khan. On a second journey, they took 17-year-old Marco Polo. He returned to Italy years later and told of the wonders he had seen. His impressions were recorded in a book now called The Travels of Marco Polo, which further stirred people's imaginations. Another person who encouraged Europeans to travel to new lands was Prince Henry of Portugal, whose sailors explored the west coast of Africa in the early 1400s. And over here, it says this historical map, circa or around 1700, shows the east and west hemispheres of the earth. So if you'll notice on this map, again, it's from the 1700s. They don't have a lot of information here for North America, do they? So this is where Canada would be, and it's not very accurately drawn either, is it? That's because they hadn't explored those areas, so they hadn't mapped them out yet. Let's take a look at the top of page 60. Trade with Asia usually moved along a route called the Silk Road. It was named for a product much in demand, Chinese silk. Sometimes goods from China came by sea because the Chinese had many advances in sailing. Goods from the East Indies also came partly by sea, but whether entirely or only partly over land, the trade from Asia had to pass through the Middle East to reach the Mediterranean Sea and Italy. In 1493, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, now Istanbul, Turkey. They cut off most European trade through the Middle East. European leaders began to sponsor or pay for voyages of exploration. They hoped to make their countries rich by finding new trade routes that did not go through the Middle East. Important advances in navigation or the science of guiding a boat made this possible. During the age of exploration, Europe was bursting with religious conflict and change. Spain wished to become an even more powerful country, and after recapturing land it had lost to invading peoples from North Africa, Spaniards called this violent recapturing of territory the Reconquista. The Protestant Reformation caused many people who were upset with the Roman Catholic Church to break away and form new churches. Some people wished to stay and improve the Catholic Church, an effort called the Counter-Reformation. Competing religions, ideas, and countries would become key drivers of the age of exploration. And here in this picture, it's a painting of merchants trading in Venice, Italy. Let's take a look at the next page. Here we have a map of Europe, Asia, Africa. And we have the Middle East right here in the middle. And this says the travels of Marco Polo, 1271 to 1295. So this shows Marco Polo's route, and that's here in red. So this is the way he went down or over to Asia initially. And then he looped around and came back by India and then came back this way. The Silk Road, that's here in green. That's the primary way goods from Asia made it to Europe initially. But again, when the Ottoman Empire came and closed down this area in here, they decided that they had to find other routes. The Europeans found other routes by sea to get to Asia to make things more profitable so they didn't have to deal with the Middle East or the Ottomans who were blocking their trade routes. Here's an infographic on technological advances. The Spanish explored the Americas in a time of adventure and discovery. A number of technological advances helped make their adventures and Portugal's exploration possible. This is called the astrolabe. The astrolabe measures the position of the stars in the sky. It helps sailors determine a ship's latitude or how far north or south of the equator they are. Europeans learned of the astrolabe from Arab traders in the 1100s. Here it is right here. The next tool that they have is the compass. A compass has a magnetic arrow that points north so that people can figure out in which direction they are going. The compass was invented in China and introduced to Europeans in the 1200s, probably by Arab sailors. The stern rudder. That's right here, the rudder. Chinese sailors used an oar that hung off the stern or back of the boat to help control its direction. This evolved into the stern-mounted rudder, which directed the flow of water passing over it to help steer a ship. By the 1400s, European shipbuilders had adopted and improved the stem-mounted rudder. Let's take a look at the next page. The printing press. Around 1450, German inventor Johannes Gutenberg built Europe's first printing press that used movable type to print the text. Printed materials could be mass-produced far more easily and cheaply than handwritten documents. They helped spread news about explorers' discoveries and encouraged others to take to the seas. The carrack. The carrack was a 3- or 4-masted sailing ship developed in the Italian city of Genoa in the late 1400s. It was very strong and useful on long voyages. The Santa Maria, the ship on which Columbus sailed to the New World, was a carrack. The sextant and chronometer. In 1759, John Bird invented the sextant. This tool uses 2 mirrors and a movable arm to measure the angles of stars in the sky. Also invented in the middle of the 18th century, the chronometer is a device that helps keep accurate time at sea. These 2 devices finally allowed sailors to determine longitude or the distance east or west of the prime meridian. Measuring longitude as well as latitude made navigation and map-making more accurate. A sea route to the Indies. By the late 1400s, Europeans knew that China and the islands off Southeast Asia had held great riches. Explorers from Portugal, such as Bartolomeu Diaz and Vasco da Gama, were trying to reach these lands. They wanted to sail around the southern tip of Africa and then across the Indian Ocean. Christopher Columbus, a sailor from Genoa, Italy, had a different idea. He believed that he could reach the East Indies more quickly by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean, known then as the Ocean Sea. He did not know the North and South American continents would get in the way. He persuaded King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, Portugal's neighbor and rival, to pay for his voyage. In return, he would claim lands and open valuable trade for Spain. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus sailed from Spain with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. For weeks, the ships traveled across unknown waters. Finally, on October 12th, a member of the crew called Lookout spotted land. Columbus would call the island he had reached San Salvador. Today we know it as a part of the Bahama Islands. A native people called the Taino warmly greeted his crew. The 2 groups exchanged gifts. Primary source. Remember, primary source means it's an original source. It's directly from whomever said it or did it. So in their words, Christopher Columbus, that means that Christopher Columbus wrote this. To some of them I gave red caps and glass beads, which they put on their chest, and many other things of small value, in which they took much pleasure and became so much our friends that it was a marvel. Later, they came swimming to the ships, launches where we were, and brought us parrots and cotton thread and balls and javelins and many other things, and they traded them to us for other things which we gave them, such as small glass beads and bells. In sum, they took everything and gave of what they had very willingly. So when they first arrived, the natives that they discovered were willingly trading with them. All right, let's take a look at the voyages of Columbus. So over on this side over here is Europe. Here is the Caribbean. Here's North America. There's Florida. California is way over here. Here's Mexico, Central America, South America. And these lines here show which voyages Christopher Columbus took. So on the first voyage in 1492, that's going to be here in purple. The second voyage in 1493 is here in yellow. Third is in red. They went to South America on that one. And fourth is in yellow. The second voyage, I went those out of order, didn't I? All right, in any case, we had the first in purple, second in green, third in red, yellow is the fourth. On his first voyage, Columbus sailed to several neighboring islands in addition to the Bahamas. He still believed he had landed in the East Indies, but nowhere did he find the riches of the Indies. Claiming the islands for Spain, he reported his discoveries to Ferdinand and Isabella when he returned home. The king and queen soon sent him back on a second voyage to extend Spanish claims. This time, he brought enough settlers and supplies to establish a Spanish colony on the island he named Hispaniola. In all, Columbus made 4 voyages to the area. Other explorers soon followed. By now, they knew that the islands were not the East Indies, but part of a mass of lands between Europe and Asia. A new world, they called it. The name Americas began to be used for these lands in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, who sailed one of Columbus's routes in 1499. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa became the first Spanish explorer to record seeing the great waters to the west of these lands. Another explorer, Ferdinand Magellan, named those waters the Pacific Ocean. Magellan died as he attempted to sail around the world. His voyage was completed in 1522 by his crew under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano. The voyage took 3 years. And this is a Taino artifact. All right. Here are their lands at about 1492. So it covers the area here in Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and the lands, its present-day names are shown, but where they were at, where those original native groups lived, is here in yellow. All right, boys and girls, Stop, rewind this video, rewatch any areas that you have questions about, and as always, we'll see you soon.